Checking. We're live, right?
We're ready. Right. Well, welcome. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. This is the Downtown Advisory Board meeting for May 28th, 2026. And let's do a call to order. Kurt Sun.
Here is via Zoom.
Kiana Che. Absent. Scott Hosmer.
Here.
Christina Jensen. Rory McManus.
Here.
Angie Oven. Here. Alan Pollock. Absent. Ernesto Toskovich. Absent. Abigail Wayland. Here. And Eddie Zappian. Absent. Lori Miller here. Okay, our number 3 on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. I'm going to approve the agenda.
Second.
And the agenda is approved. Do we have any comment?
And discussion.
Anything?
Yeah.
Discussion, comment, on the agenda? So we have to approve it. Motion to approve. We already did that.
Okay.
That's what I was asking.
Second, all in favor,
Yeah. So the approval of the April 23rd, 2026 meeting minute.
Minutes as presented.
I second. And is there any discussion or comments on that? And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Okay, and number 5 on the public comment, appearance of persons wishing to address the board on any matter other than those which are on the agenda. Do we have any public people here? People here from the public? No.
We have staff.
Yeah.
Nothing submitted.
We have staff. Okay, so we'll move on to number 6 on the action items. And we have no action items. So we're going to move on to number 7 for the information reports, which I have been very excited about. So the first one is going to be the North Waterfront Urban Renewal Area and what the next steps will be.
Yeah, so I want to welcome Sarah. Could you guide us through the update? What are the next steps? Welcome. Thank you for taking time.
Good to see you all again. The last time I was here, we got to talk paid parking, so you know, I always bring interesting things, I guess. Tori, I'll pull this up. So just as some background, we, Tori and myself, went to the agency a week ago this past Monday. And so we did do a work session regarding the North Waterfront Urban Renewal area that is being proposed. And so what you're gonna get today is a shorter version. That was about 2.5 hours. A really great discussion. So this is a much higher level, but of course, if you have any questions, just feel free. And we can answer those because we try not to monopolize your entire afternoon, just on one topic. So what you'll see here is the proposed North Waterfront URA. And I'm not gonna go into some of the whys because obviously you guys are riverfront, you understand the value. But in order for us to really start delving into any potential updates, we need to have those financial tools. And URAs can take many years to start collecting that increment. So that's kind of why we're starting to look now. Because even once, you know, it were to be approved potentially, it could be 2, 3, 4, even 5 years before we have a substantial amount of funds to really start doing that work. So the sooner the better, the more work that happens out there, the less increment that we can capture. And so that's kind of why the timing is kind of where it's at. So at the highest level, just some context. So the agency had asked staff to start looking into establishing this particular potential URA back in spring of 2024. In September of 2025, we took a very high level update to the agency. And then, as I said, just about a week and a half ago, we did a work session to really kind of delve into the boundaries, what the maximum indebtedness would be, what the projects would look like, and so that's kind of what we wanted to share with everyone today. As you can see, it's 421 acres, so if you compare that to downtown, it's almost just shy of twice the size. But if you're looking at our other urban renewal areas, McGillcrest, it's pretty similar, minus about 10 acres in size to that one. So it's not overly large. It equals 1.3% of total city acres. So we wouldn't be taking a ton kind of into the mix. If you look at the map, kind of where the boundaries lie, one of the things I especially wanted to make sure I pointed out to this group is where the southern boundary is, it matches riverfront. So the idea being really, we're looking at riverfront, we're looking at North Waterfront, and we're looking at the synergy and the connections between both, because the work that's been done, all the great projects and the investments that are happening right now in riverfront really have the potential to sort of move north over time. And so that's how we were looking at it as we were kind of establishing the boundaries. The other thing that we look at is sort of those infrastructure corridors. A lot of the work, as you all know, is infrastructure based, and so we want to make sure if we're making those improvements to allow for development to happen more readily. We don't want to just be taking in 1 block of sewer or 2 blocks of water, and then we can't actually upgrade the rest of the systems that need to be done. So we're looking at, where are those clean corridors so we can actually kind of do the entire system and not bits and pieces. We're also looking at zoning, making sure that the zoning really makes sense for redevelopment, and we're not just bringing in properties in order to bring an increment where we wouldn't actually be doing any potential work. And that kind of goes in tandem with being sensitive to the fact that it does impact the taxing districts. And so that's kind of part of it. We don't want to take tax growth off the rolls for the tax base if it's not somewhere that we really think we're going to be able to make those investments. And so that's kind of how we sort of ended up where we are with respect to kind of the boundaries as they are set forth right now. Are there any questions on this one before we move on? I would wait till the end, but what I learned in the work session is it's a lot easier to do questions along the way.
Runs north all the way to Kaiser.
Yes, so that is the, thank you, Tori, that is the city boundary to Kaiser. And part of the reason for that, because we did get some questions, not at the work session, but just internally, because that northern section does have sort of mobile home parks and things of that nature. The idea there would really be to potentially be able to focus on affordable housing preservation tied to infrastructure. So the idea being, if there are infrastructure needs, we might be able to invest to help, allow for some of that, affordable housing preservation throughout those areas. So that's kind of the reasoning behind it. And that's really kind of what you see when you go north of sort of that block that's furthest to the north, which is the park, where you don't see sort of all the little parcels. So a little history, and some of you in this room may remember some of these processes that we've gone through. The North Waterfront URA didn't just kind of pop up in 2024. There was a lot of conversation about it as potential development was going to maybe happen at the cannery. There was a lot of excitement around it, but North is really somewhere that staff, the DAB actually, stakeholders that have participated in a lot of the documents that came out of this group, we're looking north really as far back as 2010, 2011. So in 2010, the Sustainable Cities Initiative, which is something that's done out of the University of Oregon, they have students come in and they have a series of projects throughout the city that they help with, and it's part of their coursework. And they actually looked at the North Waterfront area in terms of kind of what's next. And they had recommendations to look at connections, that's really sort of a prime area to have development, to have growth, to have public access. And so the idea of really starting to look at that North Waterfront as kind of the next spot for what we can improve and how we can develop kind of started in those terms. In 2011, when we went through the Downtown Strategic Action Plan process, there was a recommendation to really start looking north. So north in terms of both riverfront, but also north in terms of at some point in time, downtown will be built out. There's only so many parcels that one can build on. And knowing that north was going to be just the natural direction And so kind of that idea of as we're developing in downtown, not forgetting that we want to connect north and instead of sort of blocking it off and not creating those open connections. In 2016, we revisited the downtown strategic action plan with probably 12 to 20 different focus groups. Are we still on track? Do all these projects still make sense? They did reconfirm that the projects made sense. They also reconfirmed that we needed to make sure we continued to look north in the future. So, you know, and some of those projects that are in your plan right now, you know, streetscape was part of that. Streetscape is a connection. It's a visual way that people feel that they're connected in spaces, which obviously we're underway, you know, right now. We have a few years left to finish it up, but that's part of it. The Mill Creek Bridge and making those improvements, which will allow development to go further north, is part of that. And so there's a lot of, you know, even just all the different grants and being able to kind of modify how those funds are used to build up the properties that then, you know, kind of close in some of those gaps is part of that as well. In 2025, the city did a housing production strategy, and the north area was identified as a recommended area for potentially middle housing, multifamily housing is a great opportunity. And so Urban Renewal would provide a tool to kind of help financially incentivize some of that type of development. And then just as recent as earlier this month, the city adopted an updated strategic plan, and in there is a goal to adopt a North Waterfront Urban Renewal area. And so it's just kind of providing a little bit of a timeline to show that it wasn't just an idea that, you know, one person came up with, but it's really been talked about in the community in a variety of different ways for almost, you know, 15, 20 years. So the fun stuff, the numbers that everybody always likes to see. So there's really two, I like to say there's two quantitative requirements when you're looking to establish an urban renewal area. And for Salem, we are limited to 15% of our total acres within a city can be within an urban renewal area. So currently and realistically, we're sort of in a gray area right now, I would say. So effective July the 1st, we would have 3.7% of acres in URAs. And what that refers to is the URAs that are still collecting the tax increment. So the reason we're kind of in a gray area right now is North Gateway and Mill Creek have stopped collecting as of this year. So little bits of increment are still trickling in, but starting July 1st, once we enter the new fiscal year, they will no longer be collecting when everyone pays their property taxes in October. All the growth that's been collected, just like what comes into Riverfront, will be redistributed to the taxing district. So even though we still have funds and we will continue to do projects, it doesn't count against the 15% because it's not impacting any taxing districts at that point in time. So the 3.7% does not include the 1.3% of acreage that would be part of the proposed. So if that were to move forward, it would obviously move us closer to a 5% out of the 15% that we're allowed. The second piece is that we are permitted to have 15% of the total property valuation within Salem in a URA. And this has always been fairly low, and as you can see, we'll be at 1.7% effective July 1st. I think we're around 3.4, 3.6 right now is also, it's not a huge change, but it is a very small percentage. So what that really means is, you know, taking out anything that's part of a MUTIP or that's getting some other type of tax abatement outside of an urban renewal area. Urban renewal itself is really collecting less, you know, 98% plus is still going out to the taxing districts. We're not burdening more than that. So when you kind of look at the reversal, we're taking a very small sort of percentage right now. And so that kind of just speaks to the why. So we've had the several kind of close. So that's kind of where we're at. So we always want to make sure we're meeting those, in addition to the thing that I know you guys hear all the time is the blight. The precursor to the creation of any urban renewal areas, we have to declare that there's blight. It's not the best word to use, but that's what state statute requires. It came up at the agency work session, and I thought we had a great conversation, and and Counselor Tegan asked the question of, you know, is it really what it is? And we had a great dialogue about the fact that really it's opportunity. You know, we have deficiencies in our infrastructure that we need to solve. And in order to solve that, it creates the opportunity for the development. I know you've all probably seen the photos when you look at Riverfront, and, you know, before we were able to start investing and the entire park was industrial, and now you can go out there and you can, you know, have events and take your kids to the park and, you know, miles and miles of bike and ped paths and things of that nature. And so there's opportunity when the infrastructure allows it. And so that's what we're hoping to be able to do if we go north. The best part, projects. Everyone loves projects. So this is high level. These are really the things that everyone's been focused on. As you guys know, when we build a plan, there's a lot of projects in the plan. And we are looking into a crystal ball. What do we see now? What do we think now, knowing we may not have money for 3 or 4 years to really start doing things. And so that's why in the plan, it's always so great. And we've done it with Riverfront. As things change, as dynamics shift, as needs change, we can always add projects to the plan. So it's really just kind of a realistic, if we had money today, what are the things that make sense? Knowing that we can always change it. So the things that have really sort of been talked about, and you probably even read in, you know, various news publications or heard people talk about, you know, the Front Street infrastructure is huge. That's what's going to open up that whole corridor for redevelopment. The creek improvements, so some of that creek is in Riverfront. Some of it is in this North Waterfront area. And so that will be sort of a collaborative kind of work that will be coming to both, you know, this group and then eventually, you know, the North Waterfront folks, however that sort of shapes out with its advisory board on how we piece that together to get that those improvements made so we can continue to develop north. The rail crossing improvements, so that ties into sort of that Front Street infrastructure. There are 5 crossings in the proposed North Waterfront area, and so those are all going to be evaluated. Our transportation folks have already identified all of those to figure out what makes sense for safety, what makes sense for development, and then how do we, you know, engage with the railroad, which is, you know, always the unknown factor in the room. Environmental remediation. There's been so many different types of uses in that area. We've got industrial, a lot of change in uses, historical uses where environmental cleanup may not have been properly done. So we're just expecting that we're gonna need to make sure that we've got some funds so we can work with DEQ and get that cleanup done or assist private property owners in doing that, because it can be very expensive. Grant program for capital development, just like we've got in Riverfront, North Gateway, West Salem, having those grant dollars available to the private property owners to really move forward on that development. The program's been beneficial in all of our different areas for all sorts of different types of projects. And so it's we want to make sure it's in there and we can kind of, yes, we're looking at infrastructure. Yes, we're looking at the larger development and the cleanup, but also we don't want to forget folks that are like, hey, I'm ready to go. Can you help me out? And so building that grant program similar to what we're seeing in our other areas. Multifamily housing is obviously a huge one, and that can be large multifamily, that can be middle family housing. So there's a variety of ways. Some of it can be affordable. We're not really defining that it, we're just kind of laying out in the plan that it really could be a variety of types of multifamily housing. So it could be that we are providing infrastructure. We've done projects in other areas where we didn't provide any money to the development itself, but we built the roads and the sidewalks and things that were needed in order to access it. We've had other ones where we've purchased a site and then we've sold it to a developer in order to do that housing. And then we've used it as kind of just like our grant programs before. So there's a lot of different sort of ways that we can look at that based on sort of how things start to develop. And especially with middle housing, it's not something that we've delved into in really any of our urban renewal areas. So I think that'll be something that'll be interesting for an advisory board down the line to sort of weigh in on, is like, what does that kind of look like in terms of funding? Do we look at it as the same as a larger project or a smaller project? And so those are things that'll come down the pipeline as we move forward. So those are kind of the big ones. And I just want to sort of point out though that, we're capturing transportation. So we're going to be capturing street and curb improvements, bike and ped paths, any sort of analysis work that's needed, especially tied to that Front Street, we're incorporating in there so that we can utilize the funds for that. We spoke about the affordable housing preservation is part of why we picked our boundaries, so we've got sort of a project in there to allow us to support that. Development infrastructure, so that's something that we did in North Gateway, which was kind of having a separate pot of funds available. Sometimes the grant funds get expended and someone's in a project and they realize, I don't have the right sewer capacity or the water capacity or things like that. And so it allows us to sort of jump in and be able to help in an area where we know there's probably going to be system infrastructure deficiencies, and people may get a little ahead of us. So it just allows us to kind of jump in a different way and help out. A big one's gonna be sort of that utility, environmental infrastructure, so, redevelopment of the creek, any sort of environmental remediation, anything along the riverbank. That's kind of an unknown, but knowing when you develop close to any sort of body of water, typically the Corps of Engineers may get involved, the state may get involved, and there could be some additional requirements. And so building something in there that allows us some flexibility to be engaging with them and potentially, helping on those kinds of issues, we want to make sure we're kind of being proactive if possible. Water, storm, sewer systems, we know they all need upgrades. So it's kind of just, throwing them all in there. And then utility infrastructure relocation work. So as we're looking at developing, most likely, and we have this in a lot of our areas, the first thing that happens is, utilities have to get relocated, infrastructure has to get relocated. And so it's letting us once again be able to potentially jump in and help with those things. So, that's where we're sort of at with the projects. And again, the idea down the line, just like what we do with our URAs that have sort of a much broader portfolio of project options, would be to recommend to bring in advisory sort of body to help guide and provide recommendations that then we can take to the agency. Okay, so how much money? That's what everybody wants to know, right? We're looking at 190, technically it's 199,400,000 for the tax increment collections. And we expect that would take about 33 years in terms of collections for that area. The first 1 to 5 years, we're looking at maybe 4 million. It's not going to be a whole lot, and then it would start to pick up kind of after that point in time. As you can see, when we're coming up with sort of what the MI is, today's dollars are going to be different than future dollars. So in today's dollars, 199 would really be 109. So it just kind of shows you building in that inflation rate. Projects are cheaper now than they're most likely going to be in the future. And so it's just trying to factor that in a little bit. Again, it's going to start slow and it'll grow over time. If we are able to get through the process and it is approved and adopted before the end of this calendar year, we would look at starting collections in fiscal year ending 2028. So it's a calendar basis, but realistically, there probably won't be much for funds coming in the door. If the sale of the cannery is to move through and if that demolition were to occur, that could sort of slow things down by about a year. The URA would be the ones to actually take the hit on that, not the taxing districts. So in some ways, it's kind of nice for the taxing districts because there would be a decrease in property values. It wouldn't be anything substantial, but it is part of the reason why sort of those first couple of years we're just estimating to be a little bit slower. And again, it's that idea that we kind of started with is, the idea is the sooner you kind of start one, the sooner you can start collecting that increment. Our boards right now have been in a great position where we have sort of, riverfront, $8 million each year that's coming in that can be allocated to different projects. And we have that in our other urban renewal areas, but it took quite a few years to get there. And so this will be something that's a little bit different and none of our boards have had, but other boards were able to set this group up to be able to make some great decisions and do some great projects. And so we're just hoping we can kind of start getting the ball rolling so that when activity and when that private investment really, starts knocking on the door, we can be there and help folks out to the north, just like we've been able to help them out down here in Riverfront. So for us, where we're at is we're in the process of finalizing our plan in our report, so that's the projects and the financials that are required by state statute. And then really we'll kind of move into sort of that state statute required approval process. So that involves, we will go to planning commission. The purpose of planning commission is not to approve the plan or the URA, but the purpose is to acknowledge that we are proposing projects in the plan that are in compliance with the comprehensive plan. So it's a nice checks and balance system to make sure ultimately that in any community isn't proposing, for instance, that they want to do all industrial and manufacturing and their urban renewal area is proposed to be in an area that is mostly all single family residential. It doesn't match. And so it's just, once again, it's another protection that was put in place. Urban renewal has not always been used appropriately throughout the country or throughout the state. And so the state has put some protections in place just to make sure that everything's, moving the way that it should be. So we would be doing that. We would be notifying all the taxing districts. So we have a mandatory 45-day notice that we provide them. We also provide them with a copy of the plan, the report. We offer to meet with them or their boards or answer any questions. And then we do a public hearing. So just kind of going through the standard public hearing process. So that would be 2 meetings to do the public hearing, the first reading, go back for a second reading. Then we would go back to the agency and they would be adopting a final resolution, sort of accepting the council's recommendation through the ordinance. After that, we do a public notice that has to get published. And then 30 days after that, we would be able to record with the county. So a lot of moving pieces. So we're on target to be able to accomplish this before the end of the calendar year. We're just wanting to reach out, obviously. Tax increment financing and urban renewal can be sort of a complicated tool in terms of how you can use it and where you can use it. And so we really wanted to make sure we were checking in with all of our advisory boards to see if there's anything that we're missing, or is there any feedback or any questions that anyone may have, knowing that we have 3 sets of advisory experts within the city that work in this on a regular basis, and just kind of, getting that feedback from everybody. And that's all I have. 2.5 hours condensed to 15 minutes. You were my test group, so.
I have a question. If one owns property within this district, is there a tax implication on those residents or business owners, or it's just the taxes get divvied up?
Correct, yes, correct. So just like any of our other urban renewal areas, it is not a new tax. So what it will do is, once it's adopted, it will freeze the property taxes as is. So for instance, in this area, if say there's $100,000 currently being collected, it'll freeze that $100,000 and it'll continue to be divided to the taxing districts as it always has. Then each year, so say in the next year, instead of being $100,000, it's $110,000. The $100,000 will continue to go out just like it always has. The $10,000 will then get redirected to the urban renewal area. Now, the one caveat to that is, if any taxing district has any type of a bond, a temporary bond or a levy, that comes out before we get funds. So only the permanent taxing rate, so the numbers can kind of shift. If there's a 10-year bond that the county has, for instance, that will come out first. After the taxing districts get their share, then that comes out, and then the URA would get what's left. So we don't impact that piece of it. You do see all the URAs on your property tax bill. It's not because you're paying an additional tax, and it's also not because your particular property is within a URA. It's just because of the property taxes being divvied. They're just showing how those are going out. At the same token, for instance, like with North Waterford or North Gateway or Mill Creek, those are no longer collecting. Taxes will not go down because of that. So that's kind of the common rule. The other thing I didn't mention is, as part of this, is we're required to send a super notice. So every mailing address within the city of Salem will get notice that we are looking to create an urban renewal area. So it's not just the geographic boundaries of sort of that area. It's everyone in the city of Salem will get that notice.
Great, good information. Any other questions?
if you have them in the future, feel free. It's a long process and we're happy to answer them. So either Tori or myself.
Well, I think that'd be great, because to have the river there and not utilize it is crazy.
Well, it
It's
is.
true. Only in Salem is riverfront property, it's the best place to store a U-Haul.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's lovely views though, come on.
Nobody's used for a U-Haul.
So the next item we're gonna learn about is Salem Urban Renewal Area Project updates. So what else?
Yeah, so we'll start here, Sarah.
Oh.
Sorry, you're stuck with me so hard. This won't go away.
So these are the urban renewal areas as they are currently. Our gateway, what they love, Riverfront downtown, South Waterfront, Hillcrest, Fairview, and Creek. As Sarah mentioned, multiple of these are at the end of their collections and still continue to do projects. Those being Fairview's there, for both Hillcrest, North Gateway, Mill Creek. West are still collecting. Probably next in line would be West Salem, as we get closer.
Got a few more years left.
As far as the North Gateway is concerned, similar to downtown and West Salem, there's a rehabilitation improvement grant out there. Like West Salem and North Gateway, there's a mix of housing, commercial, retail, industrial, and in this case, off Portland Road, this is Don Cornwall. They relocated to Salem with the help of Urban Renewal. They had a building expansion and new equipment with Urban Renewal, and now they're doing another expansion, so it's a good success story. Helping people out that direction, very successful Mexican cheese manufacturer, so if you're out that way, it's an awesome place to have. I can stop in and get tortillas and yeah, a lot of watch them make cheese. But yeah, they're expanding a lot, going into new markets, so excited to see that work. Similar to downtown in West Salem, the administrator here, the urban development, the community planning, development director, have the authorization to do up to 300,000. There can be exceptions, in case of like a nonprofit, for example, started as CTEC improvements or career technical education. Started not as a nonprofit, improvements were done, and it became nonprofit. So it's just one of those kind of hybrid conditions. So a little different than downtown. Majority of those go through an exception process, go to the agency for consideration, and they're listed historic and downtown type of things. Yeah, as far as grants are concerned, any questions on these? Similar to downtown, there's the strategic grant too for security, safety and security. So those that have the need come in and apply and get security equipment, fencing, things to protect their property.
Ours are only 20,000, I think
Yeah,
yours
so,
are
yeah,
30,
30.
so ours are a little bit lower.
Do you for the
Oh, yes.
project?
Yeah, so we have all sorts of stuff happening. I think, you know, one of the things, so we have this project happening on Silverton Road. If you've been out there in really the past year, we've been working on it. And this is a great example, and it happens a lot, especially kind of in our larger urban renewal areas. I think North Gateway is a great example. We have the happening Minglecrest as well, where we've really focused on how we can leverage the funds. Where urban renewal isn't enough to sort of do some of these big projects. And so this is a really great example. In our urban renewal plan, the focus is on sort of creating a left turn lane off of actually Silverton Road and 17th Street, because we have traffic issues, connection issues, there's pedestrian safety issues. And so it's been on the books for quite a while. And through the most recent bond process that got approved, there's funding for a variety of street improvements and sidewalks and things of that nature. And this particular area was identified. And so this is one of those where we're able to use bond dollars, and we're also able to use utility funds to actually do a much bigger project that goes well beyond the scope of the urban renewal area, but to really kind of do an entire corridor. So we have sanitary sewer rehabilitation, and it's doing 3 separate sections. So we've got some happening on Silverton, on Lana, and on Evergreen, and that's being funded with the Public Works Utility Funds. Then we've got pavement rehabilitation, and that's rehabilitating the asphalt, also doing the ADA ramps, so access, also doing sidewalk bills so that we have those connections, because of course we have those gaps of sidewalks all over the city. And that's happening from Silverton and 17th all the way up to Williams, so well beyond the boundaries of the urban renewal area, and that's being funded through the bond. And then the left turn lane from Silverton to 17th Street, which will improve the access to the pedestrian, that's what the URA is paying for. So the nice thing is we were able to bundle all of it together, which also means we're getting more bang for our buck, because the bigger the project, the better the pricing. And so engineering staff and our team work really close together when we start identifying these projects to figure out, can we wait, and so this is when we're actually, the board elected to wait a little bit to start it, knowing that we would be able to partner and get a much bigger and better project at the end of the day. So we're hopeful that it will wrap up this year. The challenge with any projects, and if you've taken Portland Road, you may have noticed kind of in the 2017 to 2019 timeframe, it felt like it took forever to sort of get our improvements done. And that's because we have to work around the state fair schedule. So we're actually not allowed to do any sort of infrastructure work that impedes in traffic during state fair. So we kind of lose some of like the best construction schedule weather. So whenever we were doing this project, we've done Portland Road, and we have another Portland Road project that we're in design for right now. We basically have to look at them in 2 phases, because we know we're gonna kind of lose out on those couple of months of work because of it. So if you're ever out there wondering, why this takes forever, that's kind of why.
It's because the state fair pays their fair share for the improvements to the road that we're doing, right?
I'm gonna let you answer that. I will say one of the nice things we did get out of this, because we had some right of way that actually the state was using that we needed for the project. And so we were able to kind of do a trade-off, and we were able to get an additional pedestrian crossing as part of this that the state is actually paying for connection. So that's something that we weren't planning on, but every now and then we can get some of those, things out of it as well. So I think that'll be really nice for folks that are in that area, just another safety kind of access point where they feel safer and more connected. So yeah, these are taken just within the last couple of months, so there's a lot of work happening out there. And we're hoping to wrap that up here in this calendar year. And McGillcrest. So McGillcrest, I just mentioned, very similar in terms of the leveraging. What you're looking at right now is a substantially complete phase 2 of this project. So this is pretty much the lower part of your screen is pretty darn close to 22nd, and at the top is 25th, and you're looking out towards the airport. And this project is a combination of every kind of fund imaginable, is really the easiest way to put it. This particular urban renewal area really was never created with the idea that we would be able to improve McGillcrest Street. So the idea was always to improve McGillcrest from 12th to 25th. It has a lot of infrastructure deficiencies. In addition to no sidewalks, no bike lanes, a lack of turning pockets, you've got a rail crossing in there. We have some stormwater issues where the road commonly likes to flood and you can't actually drive through it. There's been some issues with turn lanes when you get onto 25th. And if you had been out there up to just a few years ago and you like to use 22nd Street, it didn't actually go straight. You kind of had to take a nice little left onto McGillcrest and then an immediate kind of right, which is kind of a problem if you're a food processor and you might have a trailer or a truck, or there's a lot of traffic which backs up, which is also part of the issue because you got the light and then you've got the train at the other side of it. So we created this URA with the idea that it would be match dollars for a larger grant. So we used the money to get to the 60% design, and then we really focused on getting grants. We've been fortunate to get multiple state grants that have gone towards this project. We have stormwater funds in this project, we have utility funds in this project, but the biggest thing that we have in this project is 14 million of federal dollars through the RAISE grant. that we were able to achieve. It took us 6 tries to get there, but eventually, the application was just right. It's not the easiest, one to get. We also have bond dollars in there because it is such an expensive project. So, this, we have a little bit of landscaping to do, and then phase 2 will officially be complete. Phase 3 is going to be from 12th to 19th. Most likely, you'll start to see utilities starting to get moved, here this spring. We're finalizing sort of the design right now and, to hopefully start construction here within the next year. It could be kind of a phase 3A, 3B because it does include the railroad. So kind of as things are progressing, we may kind of get a head start and kind of work around where the railroad is and then come back and then finish it up. Those are things that we're kind of working on right now, but we'd rather keep everything moving than kind of hold up again. The further our projects go, the more expensive they become. So that's underway right now. Streetscape. There's a lot of it happening. If you walked here today, we've just started ripping up Chemeketa Street. So yeah, we're in phase 5B of Streetscape. So right now, the focus is really kind of working on the opposite side of the block of everything that we just had completed. Phase 6 is gonna focus on both sides of Liberty Street. So kind of where Jackson Jewelers is and the other side of the Forge, and we'll be kind of working in that sort of stretch will be the next phase happening there. And then the next is to be determined. We kind of work a couple at a time, and then Public Works kind of lets us know what's gonna be next. As you guys know, try to do between 4 to 6 block faces per phase. It just depends on kind of how much it's gonna cost. We take the 4 million that goes in the budget every year and see how far we can stretch it. Obviously, every area is getting the new sidewalks, the new landscaping as part of that, the water infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure. Some areas, obviously, if they have the vaults, we are filling those. That's part of the unknowns to phase 6, exactly how much we're going to do, because there are some vaults and we're in the process, I think here within the next week or two, having final determination on if they can be filled in or if it's actually better to leave them as is. And so those are the things that kind of go into what's next, which is why we can't get too far ahead of ourselves in kind of that process. But yeah, so the goal for phase 5B is to be done this fall. So notifications, I think, just went out late last week to everyone that's kind of in the project area. And then anyone that has a dining platform as well, we work with in terms of, what they would like to do with that, if we're moving it, relocating it, or if they'd like to get rid of it at the same time. So that we can kind of work with them on that process. So that's underway right now. And yeah, you should see folks out there pretty regularly. You'll also see if you drove down this morning, we're trying to make staging a little bit better. There was some issues with the last phase. Every phase, we tend to have a different contractor, so it's always a new adventure. And so we're trying to get a lot of the staging to actually happen just on the other side of block 50 right here, where it's less impactful to the core. So that is one of the changes that we're trying to make this time around that hopefully makes things a little bit better for everybody.
Something else you probably see if you're walking around downtown is the Marion construction. So you've been updated on this as far as design. Now we're actually in construction phase. As a reminder, this is an effort to update it, open it up, light it, improve the perception of safety and accessibility. As we construct, keeping it open, utilizing it, probably some movement to shift to allow for construction, and there'll be some night work. So if you're driving at night, you might see some closure. The goal is to go through the project, juggling those things and complete it before we hit the holiday season, November. So with this, opening the stairwells, as you can see on the drawing, with the new overhead structure, new signage, lighting, the lower walls too, to help with that security, safety, perception. There are a lot of landscapes and high walls around the ground board. So those are It could be removed entirely because of the parked cars, so there had to be some screening, maybe some translucent screen walls down below. Just to help people, to screen the cars, but also as people are walking in, going into the facility, being aware of what's there.
Lit on schedule.
These are things.
As of right now, everything's still on schedule. And I believe night work starts tonight, so for a couple nights.
Nice thing about this one too is it will be, for those who park on the top part, it will be overhead structure.
And it's remaining open throughout construction as
Right.
well, so if you direct people there or if you park there, phasing the work so that it never gets fully closed off.
And the grants, of course, the new building going up off of Liberty and Chinook. Nice to see that adding to the skyline. A lot of different grants happening right now. You probably saw recently with the agency approving exception for the grocery across the street and Rite Aid, so an improvement where it's gonna one of those kind of Sarah mentioned the blighted, as things sit like that, it tends to attract activities that aren't the best fit for an vibrant downtown, so being able to work with the El Torito building up there, get the agency approval for the grant, so it's actually under construction now, so that it has its own fencing up, so a lot of fencing things happening, which is exciting. Yeah, so the grants continue to help. There's been a little bit of a break in the strategic side as far as applications, a lot of inquiries, but we'll probably see another wave of that seem to be popular are those gates on the entries of buildings. Protect the entry, protect the awnings too, because it's one of those where when there's a lot of activity downtown, a lot of pedestrians move around, those are used for their purposes, but in the after hours, it's the shops should shut down. There's no infrastructure, shelter, so be able to shut that off and maintain security during the evening hours. So grants continue to help as we get into the approaching June and transitioning to the next fiscal year, additional funds to. As far as block 50, probably some activity out there as well. We've drilled monitoring wells. So what we're doing right now is having to go through environmental monitoring. There's a existing plume, we knew about it, so we're going through, we had some existing wells, we're drilling new to understand exactly where that environmental plume is. The hope is to use offsite wells and absorb socks to extract that, be able to continue to move forward with development of the site and mitigate the environmental side offsite. That's the hope. We'll find out more once all the sampling comes in. They're actively sampling now, so we'll know more in June. It's one of those where it's taking time to get everything in a position while we're working on this. The developers looked at different concepts, are working on their financing, we've had appraisal done, so there's a lot of things happening, but it's just not hitting the ground yet, so. Any questions on block 50? Block 45?
Yay.
Yeah, so wish I could say that we have a concept that's moving. I mean, there is a concept they're working with. There's some changes slightly, but the idea is still to have two separate buildings. The west facing building having a roof front, rooftop, event space that takes in the benefit of having the views of Pringle Creek, the Willamette, everything to the west for Front Park. The group is updated on the Pringle path, so that would be directly south is the wall of this property. So working closely with Public Works on that. There's an opportunity, it seemed like, if you wanted to know, when you were presented the two separate options, the linear and the curvilinear, the majority went with the curvilinear approach, that was the preferred. Whether it's the central overlook, that's what everyone really liked, is being able to be between the train trestle and commercial street and have that central area. Yeah, but also some of the feedback that came back with the linear is there's a lot happening as people take the route following the creek under Commercial Street. There's the paths that come together there. They join the path that follows through parallel to Mingle Creek. But also a lot happening with Block 45. That building would engage Commercial Street, so they'll have commercial retail on that side. So trying to do something where whatever services go in on that commercial retail side, capturing that activity and facilitating the flow into the path or the opposite direction of people in the hospital or wherever they could take the suspended path or the paths under Commercial Street east. So if you recall on the linear one, instead of that central overlook, it was moved to the east side. Wouldn't be to that extent, but it'd be something to capitalize on all the things that are happening right there. Block 45, North Street. So with this, we have the appraisals underway now. Developers looking at their financing stack and see what the options are. The two buildings, one would be market rate, the other was affordable. On the affordable side, they're doing everything they can to pull their package together to submit for state funding. So that would be a critical piece of that.
It is away still.
Yeah, and this doesn't have, I mean, it has environmental, if you go deeper, Kirk. I mean, there's history here. The way that it's intended now, it should be good with that and go down and disrupt existing environmental issues. So hopefully it's in a place where everything goes on the financing side. We get through design and permitting, it might be intent before, but that's a lot of tied to the prospect of getting home financing. Yeah.
So, any questions?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if this question goes in the spot, but I was wondering about like signs for the Pringle that we have to update. What it like, somebody had mentioned that they can't do word, a resident downtown about like creating signs that are similar to what we have in Minto, but that extend out to Riverfront and then Pringle pathway as well. And since Pringle path is about to be developed, like what that might look like, just to show more like that walkable path throughout the city.
I can see what we can do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna show that to the
Okay.
project team.
So I was like, that would be kind of beautiful, especially if you're visiting out of town or like or runners, you can just easily see the different trail systems and all of that.
So this room layer is considerably different. It's to the southeast. We used to be Department of Corrections state land. So this is one of those where you see almost immediate benefit because Sarah mentioned the tax increment. This was created in 2006. It was state property, so there was zero tax state jurisdiction. So there weren't going to be new business systems built in Salem. So our team, the agency and the state worked together to master plan this whole industrial campus. The initial issues that we ran into, there's the benefit of all being wet or flat, which is preferred. You're putting up large buildings that expand, up to 1 million square feet. With that, there were a lot of wetlands. So one of the first things we had to do is delineate those wetlands, go through, mitigate them, create a central wetland area. So if you go out there now, there's roughly 100 acres of mitigated wetlands. So that took those wetlands that would have impacted development on those sites, removed them to allow for development. And now we're kind of in the later phase. Most of the development is the sites are under contract, development's occurring. So these paths that line the central wetland area are all established. We can go out there and Next to Cooler and that way. So this general area is, if you were to follow Lancaster around by Home Depot, going to the east, southeast, Lancaster turns into Osville as it crosses Cooler. That's, we still have Oak Creek Corporate Center to the north, so Amazon and Home Depot, their warehouse distribution facilities to the north of that. So then it continues south from there down to Turner, and then up by to the east, Deer Park, corporate colleges. So it's a pretty big area. A lot of new streets have been put in, Truax, Mill Creek Drive is open, and that's where this is. So Jensco has they do HVAC, heating, conditioning, where they do manufacture, but also do installation, and this has wholesale distribution. This is good too. One of the benefits of this, we have a lot of large lots that went to wholesale distribution. We have a lot of the smaller lots that went to spec development like Actress, where you have smaller manufacturing type, especially manufacturing in those smaller buildings. So Jensco, a lot of Jensco and Dollar General, they both have new facilities out there. That's what this one is. A lot of the buildings were done and they're doing internal improvements. So we're hoping to have no more as far as timing of hiring days when new employees will start. So share that with the agency and other parties. Any questions on the Creek? Salem. This is right off of, just looking west from Wallace, where Second Street was put in, similar to Front Street. I mean, somewhat, there was a rail here, it wasn't active. There were a lot of food processors where the rail line would go in and provide the resources, movement of goods or goods from the manufacturers there. That was abandoned. We went through and improved it all the way through. So, and as a result of the street improvement, this used to be Rain Sweep that you're looking at now. That was again a pretty easily defined blight that sat for decades, not tenant or operation, was just slowly deteriorating. So as we completed Second Street, property owner went through and washed that. So this is prime on the side of San Juan of Wallace, Second Street. Then we have the same night that we did the exception for the grocery here downtown, there was an exception approved for the grant for mixed use building off in this area near Roth's here in Salem, off the Moyer and Bartel. Commercial, retail, multifamily. So they've gone through permitting, so they're ready to go. So we'll grant things together. Hopefully this summer, we'll start to see construction activity over there. And then near here, there's Goodwill, where First Street used to continue through, and majority of that street was vacated with that development. So we went through a process to vacate the remainder part to the extent where it's just now an alley. So there's an alley that curves around and allows for more development to happen further west of here on Second Street. Hopefully we'll start to see that. I believe there are things in permitting that now too. And just like this doesn't have, we haven't had demand yet for this strategic grant over here. So it's one of those areas where North Gateway and downtown have both the capital improvement rehabilitation grant and infrastructure, but those strategic security grants are predominantly downtown. Gateway, nothing right here yet, but that could change.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Any questions? What's Salem? Projects, so all happening.
Good information.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like we're gonna have another short meeting.
Do we want to find out what our next meeting topics are?
Yeah, so we wanted to hear from Salem Main Street, so there will be housing. Salem Main Street Association. And then we have, there's a project happening now about downtown pedestrian safety study, so we'll have that group update this group on those efforts. It's a downtown pedestrian safety.
I think the lights are helping.
The crossing,
Yeah.
the changes, yeah.
Because I do a lot of walking downtown.
Yeah.
You know. And it gives you enough time, like, and you can see, the people are stopped and you can kind of make an eye
Yeah.
contact before you head out.
Yeah.
So I really think it's helping.
It's,
You walk
I feel
downtown.
it's super helpful.
Yeah, I do, and the corner that my store is on is also one of the stereo.
It's a, yes, it is.
I just feel like it's improved. the
Yeah.
last couple of years.
I walk downtown too, I appreciate it.
Oh,
Yeah, we were talking about that. Okay, I'm not pulling weeds like Sheree was, but I walk downtown. Yeah, what was it, Ferry? Yeah, that one is scary, that one still is big where I'm like, okay, everyone sees me, I'm with the guy, I'm crossing. Yeah, that double left is scary.
No, I mean,
Yeah, it's better.
you see a lot.
Yes.
It's people who have some-
The commercial port area, I feel like a lot of the pedestrians feel, it just feels safer coming
Yeah.
across it because a lot of cars will just try and take that turn really fast if they don't want to pay for the street ahead, so that they try and book it, but having the pedestrians go first, I feel like they don't, they'll actually wait until it's night.
I think that was a good move.
Yes, that's great.
Madam
So-
Chair, if I might,
Yeah.
I just thought I'd add a little bit of color to the urban renewal conversation as well. I think it's great that you get a presentation that demonstrates all the work that urban renewal is doing across the city right now. As we move into this conversation about establishing the North Riverfront urban renewal area, there are lots of questions that come out of the community. Especially from a super notice, like every person in the city is gonna get noticed about it. And I think it's really important, one of the roles that you can play is explaining what a mature urban renewal area does for a place like downtown. Starting an urban renewal area is really like warming up an engine. It's gonna take a while for it to really demonstrate its value. But, you know, at this point, no one depends on property taxes in the city of Salem more than the city of Salem, right? So even if the urban renewal area, if a new urban renewal area is started, there's some amount of tax benefit that doesn't go to the school any longer, for example, or doesn't go to the county. But the schools don't use property taxes, they don't depend on property taxes as much as the city does. And even the county doesn't depend on property taxes the way that the city does. And so when the urban renewal agency decides to move forward on something like that, we're really the ones who take the most. But we know also that the benefit is really great. And so I think one of the slides that Sarah showed was that less than 2% of the property taxes in the city that are created, or less than that of the value is impacted by these. And in some ways, we're underutilizing the tool. If the statutory limit is 15% and we're only doing 2%, we're probably doing ourselves a disservice. And so after the North Riverfront, I think there's room to have a debate for, are there other places in the city we could be using this authority? Because we'll create the kind of growth that brings more students into our school district, and that actually gets the school district more money than property tax as well, that they lose through TIP. So I just would give you a little bit more to chew on there, especially when the time comes and there's more of a public conversation about, do we really benefit from these urban renewal areas? Downtown shows us that by the time these engines get warmed up, there's year over year benefits that we're getting to enjoy because of this. And we can make that happen throughout the city. So It's just kind of my perspective, and it's great that you guys get this level of information about it, because most people don't, but it's part of your charge is to go and then communicate the value as you see it.
Good information. Okay, so I guess our next meeting is June 25th. And if there's nothing else, I guess we'll adjourn. All right, see you in June.
Thank you.
Sure.
In regards to August, I think you're doing, figuring out pedestrian walkways and whatnot.